And welcome everyone to another episode of Inside CKP. I am your host, Jeremy Como. And before we introduce our guests tonight, let me go ahead and pay the bills. Of course, this show is brought to you by Chris Kennedy Publishing. You can see them at chriskennedypublishing.com. Go there for all your literary needs, sci-fi, fantasy, military sci-fi, space opera, you name it, they've got it. Go check it out. Of course, if you want to support this show and CKP, you can join their Patreon, and you get all kinds of goodies there, including CKP Confidential and other behind-the-scenes info. Of course, going back to chriskennedypublishing.com, sign up for their newsletter. I say it every week. It's a great way to get your news about all the books that are coming out of this publishing company, and you could potentially become a pre-reader, and you get free stuff. So go check it out. Follow CKP on Amazon. You can just search Chris Kennedy Publishing. Follow, rate, review, like, push all the buttons because it really helps out. And do it for your favorite authors, because this really affects how can help them sell more books and things like that. So if you want to support the artist, go ahead and rate, review, and like. And of course, you can find Chris Kennedy on Facebook, and then the fan page is The Factory Floor. And of course, if you've made it this far, you know that we have a YouTube channel, and you know where it is because you've found us. So here we go. And that's enough for me. Let me introduce our guest, Diane Reed, otherwise known as DT Reed. Welcome, Diane. How are you this evening?
Really good. Really good. It's fun to be back.
Well, good. Welcome back. Before we get started, let's tell people where they can find you and bug you online.
Okay.
We can find you at your author website there. I was telling Diane before this, I stole some of our artwork from her website. They do a real good job on your website. So I went there and stole some of your art. So good job on that. Of course, you can find her on Facebook at DT Reed Author. She has a Patreon. Check her out there. And then, of course, on Amazon, where you can find everything Diane Thornley Reed. And the same thing for her: like, follow, review, all that good stuff. And Diane, do you have a newsletter or something that they sign up for on your website?
Do, and you can sign up for that on my website. Yeah, there's several links on the There's several links on the website that you can sign up. And awesome. I put that out once a month, usually around the middle of the month. My Patreon goes out on the 1st. So if you join both, you're going to get, different things from each one. So
Awesome. And not only is she on this show, but she was on another show on our channel, Future Books, that came out at the beginning of the month. So go check her out on that and learn about all the upcoming books that are be coming out from CKP in the near future. And without further ado, we are here for a very special reason, because you've written another book and you've started another series. But there's a story behind this. But here's the cover. Beautiful cover. I love this cover.
Yes.
And
I do too.
We'll get you to talk about it and how it relates to the book. But kind of give us a brief history of how this book came about.
Okay. Well, this was what I call my training wheels book.
Mm-hmm.
And I started it while I was in college. I was in the same creative writing group as Dave Wolverton, also known as David Farland. And there were about a dozen of us in that group. And it was just kind of a what if, and I was in ROTC at the time. This was while I was in ROTC. And I didn't get a whole writing time because I was trying to squeeze 3 years of credits into 2 years. There were some credits I'd had from another school that didn't carry over. So I was having to repeat things. So I didn't have a whole lot of writing time, and it took me 7 years to write that cotton picking book.
Oh wow.
I started it in college as kind of a what if, what would happen if a military family got separated and mom and the kid are trying to get back to dad after the war's over, and they get hijacked and end up on this little backwater planet. And so the son grows up among these aliens, and they're kind of feline. And but like I say, it took me about 7 years to write it, and went through several drafts, especially once I was active duty and started really learning more about what I'd gotten into and the lifestyle of being in the military. And so I went through probably 12 drafts or so. And at one point, there was a workshop that Orson Scott Card hosted, and he and two other authors. And he said, bring a bunch of, from the writing group there at college and some of you, and come out. And it was the World Con where he won the Hugo for Ender's Game.
Mm,
And so we were there 2 or 3 days earlier for this workshop. And Dave Farland was there, and several of us from that writing group. And of course, we were pretty hard on each other, ripped each other's manuscripts apart and stuff like that. And I cornered Scott in the hall afterward and said, "Is there any hope for this?" And he said, "Diane, you're not going to have any trouble finding a home for that baby." And I went, "Well, the one thing, this is really funny. One thing he told me was, by the time chapter one starts, and I had a prologue, and he said, by the time chapter one starts, the mother has to be dead." I'm going, okay. And and so I took that and all the other notes, went back and started really going through these notes and thinking about it and thinking about it. And most of them, it wasn't too hard to apply, some of the recommendations that other
mm,
students had given me. But I thought, what do I do about killing off the mother? And then I realized it hit me that if mom is already dead, there's no motivation for Tristan to try to leave, because it is a coming of age story. It's a hero journey.
mm,
And what he's trying to do is mom gets sick. She's a combat surgeon, so she kind of carries on a medical practice such as she can in this very primitive environment, and she catches something from one of her alien patients,
mm,
and she's obviously going downhill. And Triss is about 18 by then, and he thinks, I've got to go find dad and see if we can save her. So had she already been dead, there would have been no motivation for him to leave. And so he sets off into an environment. I mean, this is really, really primitive. Um, he sets off, no clue about what he's getting into. It does find a human colony, and he and his Gan brother Pulau wander into this, and of course they get captured and turned over to, of course, Dad's worst enemy, longtime nemesis, and things get complicated from there. So, but that's kind of where it came from. And so later, when it first came out, Scott had said, "Contact me when it comes out," and because I want to review it. And um, so I let him know it was available, and
mm.
he wanted to review it for Fantasy and Science Fiction magazine. So he called me, and this is funny. The first thing he asked me after reading the book was, "The mom lives, doesn't she?" And I burst out laughing, and I said, "Scott, do you remember what? Do you remember what you told me?" And he didn't. And I told him, and then he burst out laughing. He said, "Sometimes it pays not to follow the advice of the pros." But anyway, so he gave it a really nice cover quote, and I haven't had a lot of contact with him through the years, but the few times I have run into him, he's asked, "What are you up to now, and what are you writing, and when you finish it?" So when I finished Running from the Gods, I contacted him and said, "This is what I've got, doing a new series, and CKP has picked it up, and would you be willing to give me another cover?"
Hmm.
And he said, so we did. He gave me another cover quote for Running,
That's
which I
awesome.
was very delighted about. He was Dave Farland was probably my main mentor. Like I said, we'd known each other since college, and by the time he passed away, I realized I had known him more than half of my life,
Hmm.
and it was kind of like losing a brother.
Hmm.
But Scott was a mentor to both of us, and and kind of, I guess I can claim Scott as my first writing mentor. So it's been kind of fun to have him resurfaced too.
Yeah, yeah,
But
yeah. Not a bad person to blurb your book.
exactly,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Well, so speaking of, so this is a revamped, republished version of
yeah.
the old series. So, and that's going to lead into our giveaway contest. And so I'm gonna
Eventually, yeah.
let you talk about that. See, so these are going to be the
Okay,
rules for how the giveaway is going to work.
right. So this was originally published. Ganwold was originally published in 1995
Mm-hmm.
by a New York publisher that will remain unnamed. But I'm wondering if there might be anybody in the audience who has one of those original copies.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm thinking if there's somebody out there who has the original version with the and can tell us what was on that cover, which wasn't nearly as nice as this one.
It's a
Um,
nice cover.
the first one who can describe that original cover gets a free copy of the current version, and with this gorgeous cover by J. Caleb design. I love this cover, and it says so much more about the story than that original cover did.
Well,
Oh,
Sheila has the
okay.
original paperback.
Okay, Sheila, can you give us a description? Type out the description of what that original cover looks like.
All right. While we wait on that.
Sheila and I go,
Oh, wait.
okay,
Spaceship
yeah,
explosions, planets.
yeah. Uh, Sheila and I go way back too. We've known
Uh-huh.
each other for since 79, 80, somewhere like that. So yeah, we go way back.
All
Um,
right.
yeah,
Um,
there's a big there's kind of this weird sea creature looking spaceship with explosions and a couple planets in the background. It's a space battle. But yeah, okay. Sheila, you're our number one winner.
all right, number one. All
Uh-huh.
right. So what are the and we're doing 3 books. So what are the rules
Yeah.
for the
So
other two?
Sheila, let us know. Do you want a trade paperback or a e version? Your choice. Uh,
No. And
um,
then while she comes back with that, what are the rules for the other? Because you want to give away 2 other books.
yeah, two
So
more. So just let's go for some funny comments or questions or
good
whatever.
question.
Just have fun with it.
All
Okay,
right.
you got a trade paperback, Sheila.
All
Yeah.
right. All
Okay,
right.
yeah, trade
Good deal.
paperback.
All right. So
Oh,
people,
you get an autograph too.
yeah. Funny comments, funny questions, good questions, thoughtful questions, come with them. So now, how did you come about? Because you already have a series with CKP that's doing pretty well, and that's the
Yeah,
uh,
that's the Seventh Shaman series.
Seventh Shaman series,
So
and here it is.
yeah,
Great
and that's
covers
some of the
again.
art that Jeremy stole off my website.
Yep.
My web designer is great. She does this 3D thing with the book covers,
Yeah,
and
she's
so
great.
that's some of the art that Jeremy borrowed from my website.
Yeah.
Um, anyway, yeah, this is how this came about. The resurgence of the Serengeti books
Mm-hmm.
was uh, Jim McCoy, who does a lot. He's got his blog and he does a lot of reviews for CKP.
Mm-hmm.
He contacted me in May and said that for Memorial Day he wanted to recognize 4 veteran authors who write military science fiction, and I was one of them that he chose. And he wanted to review one of my books. And I'm going, Jim, you've already reviewed all 4 of them that are in print. And he goes, I went back and found your backlist. And I'm going, oh, no, not my training wheels books. And I thought, oh, he's going to be so disappointed because he'd just given these glowing reviews to the 4 Shaman books so far. And I was working on book 5, and I had told Chris I was planning to, we kind of settled on the end of July for a deadline for me to turn in book 5 of the Shaman series. And And so, anyway, Jim reviews Ganwold's Child, and he gave it 5 stars, much to my shock. And he says, "Have you these to Chris?" And I said, "No, I haven't." He says, "Well, you need to. They're good." And okay, kind of gritting my teeth. So I sent the link to his review to Chris and said, "This is what Jim said, and are you interested?" And he said, "Yes, send me the first manuscript." And so I did. And within a couple of weeks, he came back and he said, "I want the whole trilogy." And but
That's
and
awesome.
so he said, just put them together in the CKP format and send them to me all at once. And I said, okay. Well, I pulled up Ganwold's Child and looked at it, and I went, there is no way I'm sending it to him in this condition.
Mm-hmm.
I was looking at something like, I did editing work for Dave for several years, and he would send me the manuscripts written by a lot of his newer students. And so I would do a lot of mentoring in the margins and stuff like that, and coaching them and encouraging them.
Mm-hmm.
And I was looking at a manuscript that looked like something Dave would have sent me from one of his newer students. I'm going, I can't believe this New York publisher published this. I was so embarrassed that they would publish this in this condition. It took me 3 weeks just for Ganwold and another 3 weeks for each of the other two books to go through. And the last one wasn't quite as bad. And the thing that's interesting about that was by the time I was working on that third book, I'd signed a 3-book contract in January of 94, and they wanted this third book by October of 94, and it wasn't even going to be released until September of 97. So I mean, I had 9 months to crank that thing out, and so it was. I don't think it was as polished as the others. I didn't have as much time to really develop it, and it was by far the most research intensive of the three. I was living at my keyboard 12 to 14 hours a day. If the cat wanted attention, he had to jump on my lap to ask for his positive strokes because I wasn't. I barely left the keyboard, and except for to do the research, and of course at that point I couldn't just Google things. That was back in '94. The, yeah, I'm talking about. Yeah, I walked uphill in the snow both ways to school. I mean, that's how I feel. But it was. I mean, it was yellow pages, making phone calls. Interviewing people either over the phone or in person. I was stationed at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base at the time, and I slid into the reserves because left active duty for the reserves because I knew there was no way I was going to get this kind of book written, full-time active duty.
Mm-hmm.
And so I could put in 1 week of reserve duty and use, and it was enough to cover my expenses so I could spend the other 3 weeks writing. But I did have for a while a part-time job at, get this, the Navy toxicology detachment there on at Wright-Patterson. And so I was doing research for them in the local university's medical library. And so, along with doing research for them, I was doing research for me. And so that's how a very research intensive book. Um, but I did get it turned into them. And
Yeah.
yay, Dale. Dale and I go way back too. We were in college together too. So anyway, yeah, got that one turned in. And it was like it felt like it was kind of a rush job, but I got it turned in on time. And anyway, so yeah, it took 3 weeks with each of those books to get
Wow.
them in suitable condition for Chris.
Now
And
you
it
keep
was
on
mostly
mentioning.
just
I'm sorry. You keep on
pardon,
mentioning research. What kind of research are you talking? What are you researching?
medical research. I did probably a master's degree worth of research on central nervous system injuries and how to rehab them.
Oh wow, very
Yeah.
interesting. All right, cool. Uh, here's a question that Sheila beat me to it. What kind of
Okay.
revisions did you do? I read your original back in the day and forgotten a lot of the book. Felt like I was reading a Tom Clancy novel. Wait, 200 pages in and meeting the new characters. So yeah, what kind of revisions did you have to do? Was it a lot or?
It was mostly just newbie author stuff.
Mm-hmm.
In the course of editing, I discovered that there's a handful of words that get really, really overworked. And the five top most overworked words are that, look, walk, turn, and grab.
Mm-hmm.
And I overused look a lot and turn a lot.
Mm-hmm.
So I had to go through and find synonyms. And one thing that, that coaching a lot of these new students is walk gets really boring. Think about how your character moves. You can develop a character just through using the right verb to describe how they move.
Mm-hmm.
And given what kind of situation they're in, are they sneaking, tiptoeing, stalking, striding, pacing, limping? You know,
Mm-hmm.
so there's a lot you can tell about your character just by choosing the right verb. And so there were things like that, awkward sentence structures, occasionally some odd punctuation
Mm-hmm.
that I wanted fixed. Just a lot of just a lot. I mean, basic uh, new author stuff, type of stuff. I was surprised. I was pleasantly surprised that the stories were strong, a lot stronger than I expected them to be.
Mm-hmm.
Given nearly 30 years, they're very different. Um, the Shaman series is military space fantasy, and we get into a lot of Ku's, um, his people's belief system,
Mm-hmm.
and how that affects him in his military career. This, even though the cover for Ganwold almost looks borderline Tarzan,
Mm-hmm.
it quickly becomes a military political with an edge of thriller. And there's more. The thriller comes to a head in the third one. There's more of a spy feel to it, where all of the pieces that are coming together in the third one, including putting a character back together, which is where the medical research came in. Um, yeah,
Yeah, so yeah, I'm glad you said that because just looking at the cover, I was thinking like a Lost Way. Just because I know what you write with science fiction and everything, I was thinking Lost World, you know, uh, you know, modern people going to a primitive planet, which I guess is some of it. But
yeah,
to hear this is it makes it it's you can't judge a book by its cover, even though it's a great cover. And where it's got a lot more meat to it than what the cover may suggest.
yeah. Well, the cover shows where Tristan starts from, and
Mm-hmm.
yeah, his mother did come from a high tech society, and so I mean, she really had to go through some struggles adjusting to extremely primitive situation. But Chris grew up there. I mean, he was a toddler when they landed there. And so he assimilated the way toddlers do and picked up the language of his GAN counterparts. And so he assimilated very quickly. And and so this is, you see on the cover where he starts from.
Mm-hmm.
And then he's got to readjust to a high tech culture and get thrown into it. Pretty kind of the reverse situation of what his mother was dealing with,
Okay,
landing on Ganwold.
very
Uh,
cool.
yeah, so it's kind of fun, and there's a little bit goofy in a couple situations where he gets exposed to a few new things that are like, "Let me out of here!" And then he realizes he's being held hostage, and he really wants out, and he makes a few kind of bad choices along the way, uh, ratchets up his own situation a little, um, but
So Tristan
yeah,
is the main
so
character.
that's kind of where the political thriller comes in. Excuse me, Jeremy.
So Tristan is the main character.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
and he's 18, so it doesn't qualify as and he's, let's see, by the second book he turns 19. I guess he's 19 by the end of the trilogy.
Okay.
Um, but the thing that's interesting, yeah, the Shaman books, that'll be seven books, and that story does have a conclusion with the seventh book. I could follow some of the characters off on other adventures. But when I was on this Future Books, the Future CKP podcast,
Mm-hmm.
no, it's a different one that's going to be released next week. That Chris and Paul Piet and Rob Howe, there were four of us on there,
Mm-hmm.
And Chris and Paul were talking about his Abner Fortis series, and the fact they're talking about book number 14 for Abner Fortis, and they're going, "Oh my gosh, I've got a lot of book writing to do," and I'm not a fast writer. But I realized looking at the Tristan,
Uh-huh.
we have a lot of potential there. I started going back through my files the next day after doing that podcast
Mm-hmm.
and realized I knew I had started one sequel with Tristan and discovered two and a very comprehensive timeline. And then it picks up right after, I mean, probably an hour or two after the third book ends. And and then the other day I was looking for something else in a little plastic storage box on my shelf and found three or four synopses that were intended to go to the New York publisher because that editor had asked me if you got more,
Mm-hmm.
and 117 pages of yet another manuscript. So I'm going, yeah, we got some potential here.
So
And
we're
I told Chris the day after that podcast, I says, I could probably keep Tris perpetually in his mid 20s and just write several adventures that don't necessarily have to be read in any particular order.
oh yeah,
Just some fun books,
yeah.
and just see where this kid is going to go.
Like
So there's some potential there to carry on. Um,
so
when
like full
when
novels or novellas or
probably there's potential for uh, some full novels. I mean, what I had outlined for the New York publisher were some complete novels, and there's a couple of them I'm going to have to rethink a little bit. But yeah, Tris could have quite a career.
that's
And
awesome.
then Jim and I were brainstorming a little bit and just thinking, I don't even remember what prompted this and whether it was he came up with it or I came up with it. But we thought, what would be fun to do kind of a cross universe story and throw Koo and Tris into the same book? And what are they going to do? Because they both end up being spec ops types.
Mm-hmm.
And they do have quite a few similarities, but they have some very pronounced and significant differences. And I was thinking the other day, these two kids would probably either kill each other or go through some pretty, some, and then work things out and decide that they're, brothers in arms for the rest of their lives.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Or a little
So,
column A, a little column
so
B.
pardon?
A little column A, a little column B, a little mixture of both. They want to kill each other, but then they grow to love one another.
Yeah. Jim and I have even kind of talked about the opening scene and kind of we started doing brainstorming. I have to tell him I've got to I've got to finish the shaman books first
Mm-hmm.
before we can
Mm-hmm.
play with this. But we even have a working title for it. So
Oh, very cool. Very cool. I'm excited.
yeah,
It's got to be so exciting to
it is.
rediscover or just breathe new life to an old story. That's amazing to me. I love that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and it's amazing to me too, because I had never intended to really look at those again. Like I said, training wheels books. And I
Hmm.
was especially after I saw them, I'm kind of embarrassed.
Hmm.
But yeah, the stories are strong, and they just needed some cleaning up as far as the writing style because my writing style had matured so much over all
Hmm.
that time. But it is fun to see them coming back, and I'm just waiting to see what. I mean, I love Jake's Ganwold cover, so I'm just waiting to see what he's going to do with the others.
Yeah.
And
No, it's a really good cover. So
I'm
what?
just kind of, pardon?
So speaking of the cover, who is what I'm assuming is like a cat-like humanoid
Yeah,
or something like that. What are we looking at here?
you can't really see him. The idea that was given to, and wasn't even me that gave it. I had an idea similar to this
Mm-hmm.
of Tris and Pulau
Mm-hmm.
surveying this human colony. But I didn't really dare mention it to Chris because I thought it probably isn't going to be science fiction enough. We had a little bit of discussion when Running first came out because Clue has long hair, and the way he's portrayed on that cover, it's um it's a typical military haircut.
Hmm.
And so Chris and I talked about that a little bit, and he didn't really go into detail. He just said there's certain expectations for military science fiction, and to give it, and the way he's angled, we can assume his ponytail is down his back, and he said, but we don't want to confuse potential buyers.
Hmm.
And so I read between the lines, and I'm going, okay, yeah, military haircut, give him long hair, and we're either looking at fantasy or perhaps even romance.
Hmm.
So we don't want to confuse readers. So I thought, I don't know, what the feeling would be, if I gave him the suggestion for Tris and Pulau. Well, it turns out that Randall Willis, who's the slush reader,
Hmm.
actually gave Chris the idea.
Oh, awesome.
And so Chris just ran, and I had given Chris a couple of other ideas, and so Randall sent this to Chris, and Chris kind of forwarded Randall's message to me and said, "What do you think?" And I'm going, "I love it." You know, spun off my original idea, but oh my gosh, I mean, just the work description that Randall gave, and so Chris turns this over to Jake, and then when Chris gave me the first look version, I'm just going, "Oh my heart, this is amazing." So anyway, the Ganon are kind of anthropomorphic cats.
Hmm.
They're not quite the Depic,
Yeah,
the
they're much
Boy2
larger.
universe. They're and actually he's on the cover. When you look at the cover, I pictured them as being more lanky
Hmm.
and not as tall as humans, a little shorter, um, kind of a half cat, half human features, kind of smeared from one into the other.
Hmm.
They do have fangs,
Hmm.
the kind of tabby stripes, cat ears. They don't have, well, maybe a little stub of a tail,
Hmm.
um, but like a tabby cat stripe coat. They do have fur. They can purr,
Hmm.
growl. They're hunters, hunter gatherers. Their culture is very much hunter gatherers. So Tris learns to kill elk-sized critters at a young age using just a hunting knife.
Wow. Oh, yeah.
They
Up
gave him,
close.
well, Jake gave him a couple spears that he's got strapped on his back in the art, which is cool.
Yeah.
But basically, they work in a pair, and one will distract the animal, and the other will sneak up and tackle it, kind of like bulldogging in a rodeo, where you know, and so Tris, being the bigger of the two, once he gained his growth spurt, would be the one who would sneak up and grab this critter by the horns and throw it, and then Pula would sneak in and cut its throat. And they'd hold it down until it bled out. So yeah, just I mean, this is why they've got a proverb of hunter who goes out alone brings home no paymu, because it
Hmm.
takes two of them to take down a paymu.
That's awesome. So,
So this is, and so when Tris goes off and is about to go off in his quest, Pulau reminds him that hunter who goes alone can't bring home the paymu, and also that hunter who goes alone can't watch out for the wolves from all directions. So when
mhm.
they're out in the field, they sit back to back so that they can have 360 degrees of watching for they're called jows in their culture,
Mhm.
but they're basically wolves.
That's
So
awesome.
anyway, it's a
No,
little bit
no,
about the
no.
gang culture.
Yeah, it's cool that he comes from an advanced civilization, but he basically grows up as a native to the planet,
Oh
which
yeah,
is
yeah.
pretty cool.
And he speaks again the Gan language, which is a lot of growling and hissing and stuff like that.
Oh, very cool.
And I mean, he can speak the human language because, of course, he grew up with his mother teaching him that, so he's bilingual,
Hmm.
which is a good way for kids to learn the languages when they're toddlers.
Yeah.
And so he is bilingual. He does speak it. He tends to speak in kind of short, concise, and very direct.
Hmm.
And he's very direct. And this is interesting. When the differences between Ku and Tris, Ku is snarky in when he says.
Mm-hmm.
Tris is snarky with his body language.
Okay.
He doesn't verbally snark off, but that boy can let you know just by his posture and his facial expression.
And does he
He's not
get
a,
that? Is that just his personality, or does he get that from like the other creatures and stuff? Is that how they use a lot of body
this one's like that's just his personality. That's just what he is. But he does have some GAN tendencies. Well, cat-like. They have their claws, and,
language?
that's how they fight. I've
Mm-hmm.
got cats. I've watched them tussle, and they tackle each other by the head, and then kick the daylights out of each other. And so when he learns to fight, of course, it's with claws.
Mm-hmm.
And he's grown his fingernails out because they're his claws. He needs them in this hunter-gatherer society. So one of the first things that they do to him when they capture him is cut his fingernails. And he's going, "What have you done to me? He's taken my claws," and he's pretty upset about it. Um, but there's one point where he gets into a fight with another kid, and he goes after him the way a Ganwold, with
Mm-hmm.
and tackles him.
Huh.
Which this other kid isn't quite sure how to deal with that.
Yeah.
And he does, punch, Black Tristan's eye, but I mean, Tris fights the way he grew up fighting. So,
A bit of a culture shock. Yeah.
that's a cultural thing. So,
So, one thing I've enjoyed is seeing your the artwork that you've put out for your shaman series, and where you talk about with the long hair and everything like that. Are you going to
right.
do some of that for this series?
Um, yeah, I found a picture. Um, the pictures I came up with of Ku that's on my website, and I don't know if you borrowed that too.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, I did that on Midjourney,
Mm-hmm.
and when that came up, I'm going, "Oh my gosh, nailed it! That is cool." And yeah, he's got the longish hair, and he's in his flight suit, and yeah, it's very much cool.
Mm-hmm.
I found Tristan on Pinterest,
Oh yeah.
and he's got this, and he's on my website too.
Okay.
As a matter of fact, my web designer just finished that today, putting a picture of Tris and the book cover up with the back cover copy beneath it. Um, so he's blonde, got kind of wild looking hair, and kind of like a mane, like the male Ganon have kind of manes, kind of lion like.
Mm-hmm.
So he's got kind of his lion mane going there,
Well, I'm
but
gonna go check it out.
he's got this very angry teenager look to him, and I'm good. That's so perfect because he is pretty much he goes through, especially the first book, being a very angry teenager. They've got a lot of reasons to be angry.
Awesome.
So
Well, I look for it. I'm gonna go check that out after the show because I have enjoyed your other Mid Journey stuff. It kind of uh, brings the character to life, and I've really enjoyed some of the artwork that people have come up with that program.
yeah, and a lot of
So
these people, I've other. Excuse me. Go ahead. Sorry.
oh no, after you.
I've had other authors talk about how they like to have pictures of their characters in front of them.
Mm-hmm.
I remember one of these podcasts where Todd Fonstock was on, and he was talking about some of his characters, and he had artwork of some of his.
Mm-hmm.
And I've got for my shaman books. I don't think I could take this camera off and you could see it from across the room.
Mm-hmm.
But I've got a whole gallery of even some of the secondary and tertiary characters
Mm-hmm.
taped up across the front of um, the shelf that's above my desk. And then I've got the major characters, uh, uh, Ku and Derry. And lately, while I've been working on the Sergey books, the picture of Tris. And for some reason, it really helps you keep them in character. I mean, you
Mm-hmm.
can look at them and go, he wouldn't do that. He
Mm-hmm.
wouldn't say that.
Yeah.
Yeah, he would say that.
Well,
Or that's not what she thinking,
yeah.
So, and it's fun. So yeah, I've got my little rogues gallery taped up there in front of my desk where I can just look at them and go, mm-hmm.
Yeah, I can imagine
Um,
that being very helpful because I know some of the other authors will just like do hand drawings of their characters and stuff to keep it in their mind. I mean, if anything, just to describe movement
exactly.
or
Yeah,
things like that, and it makes perfect sense. So I'm not a writer, and but I have my brother and I kind of feel the same way. If there's a movie of a book, I will go watch the movie before I read the book because
oh,
inevitably, I don't want to be that person. Oh, the book's so much better than the movie. No, no, no. I'll go watch the movie first, and it allows my imagination to be so much better when I'm reading the book because I have these visuals. And so
yeah,
I read the book, and the book inevitably 9 times out of 10 is going to be better than the movie because you can only put so much in a movie. But
exactly.
that movie helps me with visualization and makes the book so much better for me. My brother and I call it the books are the DVD extras. We go in there and we read it, and because it's got so
Yeah,
much more story and description and everything like that, but because of the movie, it makes it better because I don't have the best imagination, so it really helps me uh, imagine the characters a little bit better.
yeah. You can visualize. You know what the characters look like
Yeah, yeah,
when you're reading the book after seeing the movie. So yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
All
That's
right.
and I've had some experiences like that myself too with a
Yeah,
few movies that I've seen the movie before I've read the book and kind of the same thing. Okay, now I know I know
yeah,
what they look like.
yeah.
So anyway,
And so
did you
we
want to go
reach.
ahead and do the reading at this point?
Yep, you beat me to it. Go for it. So
Oh,
what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take myself off and give you center stage. So and then people in the audience, if you have questions or snarky comments, now's the time to gather them and put them in there because we'll probably be doing the giveaway shortly after the reading.
okay. Yeah, and if you want to throw out snarky comments about what I'm reading too, this is from chapter 20, so it's fairly late in the book. Tristan has been tortured by the guy that's holding him captive, his father's nemesis, and this guy's trying to use um, um, he's trying to use Tristan as a pawn to coerce his dad, and so he tortures the kid, intending to kill him, and sends pictures to dad. So like, you know, this is what happens, and I've got your wife too. So anyway, so Tris manages to escape and he's had a few days to start healing, and there's been a combat medic who's he works for this guy, but he's on Tristan's side. So he's
Well,
been kind of taking care of him, starting to get him put back together. And then Dad's got one of his people on the inside, and he shows up and says, "We got to get the kid out of here now." So Tris is partly healed, and he's been through part of pilot training.
mhm.
He's been forced into go to pilot training just to dangle him as bait for Dad. And had he grown up under his dad's shadow, he would have loved piloting. But because he's being coerced into this, he's not too excited about it. Anyway, so this is the situation, and he's there in process of escaping. He's only partly healed at this point. Let's see.
All right, I'm gonna take my image off, and it's just gonna be you. Okay.
Okay. All right. And I can't see anything right now except for the manuscript in front of me. So anyway, they're dashing across this landing bay. So in a mining facility. Ribbons of brilliant energy sizzled across the loading area from several nooks and corners, searing holes into the walls and floor of the passage before the door slid closed again. Security is already in position out there, Nemec said. And he's the guy that Tristan's dad sent in. A series of muffled explosions began at the far end of the passage behind them, energy weapons blasting at its automatic door. "They're closing from the rear, too," he said. "Let's go. The nearest bay is to your right as you go through this door." He removed the receiver plug from his ear and adjusted a dial until it buzzed. "Simulated bomb," he said with a tight smile. "When I throw this out, run. There's plenty of cover. Stay low, keep moving, and don't clump together." In the passage behind them, the blasting had stopped. They heard boot falls instead, coming closer. Nemec waved at the door trigger and rose just enough to lob the receiver into a maze of starter carts and ore chutes. Its buzz filled the concourse. A dozen security troops dove for cover. Go, Nemec said through his teeth. He twisted around, pistol leveled to cover them. Pulau, teeth bared and eyes wide with Tsachi, and that's the kind of the fight response they go into, tugged Tristan's arm over his shoulder. Run, he hissed, run. He ducked behind an ore chute, dragging Tristan with him. Meters away, the chute disappeared through a dark arch into a launch bay. Hey! A shout ran across the concourse. Hey, there they go! A bolt of energy seared across the top of the chute and smashed into the wall behind them. Its burst sent fragments of concrete flying. Still at the mouth of the passage, Nemec squeezed off a shot at the sniper and gave Weil a shove before and Weil is the medic who's been taking care of Tristan. Gave Weil a shove before he spun to take aim at their pursuers in the passage. The whole concourse flashed with flying energy. It contained lightning storm that concentrated on the passage entrance. Bursts gone astray shattered off the pressure door's frame. One exploded on its trigger. The shield slammed closed, sealing Nemec inside the passage. Weil leaped for the cover of the ore chute. A burst caught him in midair, high in his chest. Its impact smashed him against the wall, marking it with blood as he crumpled to the gravel-strewn floor. He didn't move. Weil, no! The shout startled Tristan. It took a moment for him to realize it had come from his own throat. But Pula pushed at him and panted, Go! Run! Bolts followed them under the arch, glanced from the ore chute, shattered off the walls. Pulau fell headlong, taking Tristan down with him. The fall slammed the breath from his body and made his consciousness reel. White heat screamed over their heads. The energy bolts lit the launch bay beyond with showers of sparks as they struck the deck and illuminated the shuttle that waited with 3 of its cargo holds closed, the 4th still open. Pulau grimaced, gaining his feet. His mane stood on end and his eyes appeared half crazed. He staggered, dragging Tristan up. He hyperventilated and his breath rattled in his chest. Run, he hissed, run. They tumbled up the ramp to the shuttle's cockpit in a hail of fire. Panting, Tristan had to swipe twice at the hatch's closure before he managed to punch it. The ramp bumped and grated as it folded itself, unclunked and hissed as its pressure seals locked. A volley of energy ricocheted off the shuttle's hull and crisscrossed the launch bay like more trapped lightning. Tristan shoved himself up from his knees and pushed Pulau toward the co-pilot seat. Strap in, he panted. Gotta get us out of here. He flinched and gasped, vision momentarily tunneling when he dropped into the pilot seat. Fumbling for his harness, he saw Pulau doing the same, confusedly, awkwardly. This way, Tristan said, reaching for the clasps. The Gan only nodded, watching him. The wildness had left his eyes. The nictitating membranes showed in their corners instead. He still breathed through his mouth, too quickly and with his tongue showing. Sporadic bursts of energy showered the craft, each sounding like a small explosion. Teeth tight, Tristan snatched the headset from its hook and put it on. He took in the instrumentation with a glance and released a breath of relief on finding it had the same configuration as the Academy's training shuttles. He ran one hand across the console, found the systems check switch, flipped it on. Blue readouts filled a tiny monitor. All systems showed green except a light that warned one cargo hatch remained open. 2 coolant reservoirs read low, but all the engines had maximum fuel levels. Tristan flipped the manual lever to close the cargo hatch. Start engines, he recited under his breath, and toggled the switches. In the dark of the launch bay, pink clouds erupted from beneath the craft as each engine screamed to life. The barrage of fire broke off, and several humanoid shapes leaped clear. Instilled by his pilot training, Tristan keyed the comms pickup. Control, this is... He stopped himself abruptly and released the button. No, it'll give us away. Instead, he hit the bay dome's remote control button. Warning horns blared through the launch bay. Lights flashed above its entry. The gunman, shadows in motion, dashed for the arch before its pressure door slammed down. Above him, the dome's fins began to spiral slowly open, showing space beyond stars, and the mottled light of the second moon. Tristan spread his hand over the row of thruster switches, eased them up one fraction, then another, and felt a tremor as the roar crescendoed and the hole full of sky expanded. Blue letters began flashing on his screen. Dome override activated. He glanced up. The fins, like petal of a flower, stood half open. In his earphones, Control said, Malin 05, abort launch sequence. You are not cleared for launch. I say again, you are not cleared for launch. The eye of space began to contract. No, Tristan shouted. Stop! He shoved at the thruster switches with a shaking hand, missed the 3 on the end. The craft lifted sideways. The attitude indicator showed an angle of 54 degrees. The bay wall loomed up, tilting before his canopy. Cadets who do that don't get their crests, his IP had told him, even if they live to tell about it. The impact threw him into his harness. He heard a crash and a shriek of metal on metal, and the shuttle rolled. He caught a glimpse of twisted fins on opposite edges of the dome's eye as the shuttle momentarily hung inverted over it, and realized he wouldn't have cleared it at all if he had lifted correctly. He took the row of switches with both trembling hands. As the craft completed its roll, so its thrusters pointed at the surface, he fired them all. His leap flattened him in the seat, leaving him breathless. His vision tunneled again. Trilling and a flashing red light on the console snapped him to full awareness. His gaze shot to the traffic scope, then outside the canopy. Another shuttle, its red and white anti-collision lights flashing against the starfield, banked hard to avoid him, mere meters away. Through his headset, he heard, Control, this is Malin 3. Where are your heads? You had us on collision course with another ship. Suddenly weak, Tristan let his hands slide from the console. He couldn't control their shaking. They felt hot and dry, but he must have been sweating. His soaked tunic clung to his back again, burning and itching. He shut out the voice rattling through the headset, ordering it to return, and closed his eyes for a second. A new voice in the earphones made him start. Malin 5, this is System Defense, Bravo Station. You are in violations of regulations 91.9, 91.73 Delta, 91.8. Tristan stared, then keyed his comms. Shove off, Defense. I'm operating under regulation 93. Bravo. A pilot in command may deviate from any rule to the extent required to meet the emergency. Malin 5, the voice from System Defense said, you are ordered to return to your point of departure and surrender to the authorities. Failure to comply will warrant destruction of your ship. Destruction? Tristan stiffened in the seat. Malin 05. The voice remained impassive. We are launching fighters with orders to engage and destroy. I say again, we are launching fighters with orders to engage and destroy. Acknowledge, over. Tristan checked his traffic scope. Empty, for the moment. With a shaking hand, he switched off the radio, tore off the headset, and reached for the thrusters. Hold on, Pulao, they're coming after us. He couldn't outrun them. He knew that. Still, he rolled the shuttle like an attack ship over its target and aimed it at the second moon. In a few minutes, a beep from the traffic scope begged his attention. A point of light blinked at its edge, 195 degrees relative to his heading. The fighters. Locking his teeth, he gave the shuttle full throttle. The beep grew louder, faster. Tristan squinted at the traffic scope. The single blip of light had become 2, close together and crossing the scope's outer ring toward the center one, closing the distance. When the pair of blips split into 4 and penetrated the scope's inner ring, Tristan twisted around in his seat and regretted doing it for the shock of pain the abrupt movement triggered. He tried for a visual fix. Position lights blinked against the starfield. The fighters had come in high, ranging 170 to 190 degrees relative to his heading, and flying in a fluid 4 formation. The leaders drew close enough to switch the warning beep into a trill. Tristan caught a flash at his periphery. They're firing on us. He reached for the instruments panel to activate deflector shields. The shuttle didn't have any. His hand froze over the emergency release for the cargo holds instead. His craft rocked at the hit. Hands hard on the thruster switches, Tristan brought it out of its tumble and stared at a pair of damage lights blinking on the console. His starboard aft thruster had been destroyed. Manipulating the switches, he put the shuttle into a series of banks and rolls, altering altitude and heading at random in an attempt to shake his pursuers. The lead and one wingman stuck with him. Their blips hovered near the center of the traffic scope, practically at point-blank range. Tristan reached for the deflector shield switch again. Once more, his hand closed on the cargo release lever. 3 of the cargo holds are full. On impulse, he yanked the lever and shoved the shuttle into a spinning dive. Thunks sounded somewhere after the cockpit, followed by several seconds of scraping noises, and jettison lights flashed on the console. A silent explosion blossomed at the hub of the shuttle's 180, then another close enough to be a secondary of the first. The light reflected red and orange in the cockpit canopy. Leveling the shuttle out, Tristan peeked around his shoulder and saw 2 fireballs dissipating in a cloud of chunk ore that tumbled and spread like an asteroid field. He glimpsed the remaining wingman banking clear of it, one rocking as if he'd taken a hit. Tristan let out his breath in a burst. His heartbeat shook his whole body. He didn't relax. The traffic scope showed the other 2 fighters regrouping. They flanked the shuttle this time, keeping their distance, though staying within firing range. Tristan fingered the thruster switches, jerking his craft about as if in a storm and rocking it on its longitudinal axis. The blast that connected was sheer chance. It sent his shuttle into a flat spin that threw him into the instrument panel and pinned him there. The starfield whirled in Doppler circles beyond his canopy. Pressed to the instrument displays, stomach in his throat, Tristan dragged one hand to the thruster switches. Malfunction lights blinked on most of them. He toggled the ones that remained to counter the spin and kept swallowing down the gorge burning in his throat. As thrusters slowed the craft and the pressure began to ease, Tristan pushed himself away, panting, and scanned his console. Half the cockpit flashed red. A diagram on one screen showed depressurization lights in all but 3 compartments. The cockpit was sealed off. Structural stress lights blinked at 6 points. Only 3 of 8 engines remained. The traffic monitor still worked. Its beep matched the throb of the damage lights. Tristan stared at the scope. A third blip filled it now, bearing 75 degrees on his relative vertical and closing fast on a collision course. Its position put his shuttle at the center of a diminishing triangle between it and the fighters. He tore his vision from the scope to scan space. The swollen glow of S.2 filled half the canopy, directly over his head. As he stared, the space between the moon and his shuttle seemed to ripple. He blinked, straining to make his burning eyes focus. A ship materialized out of nowhere, massive and black and bristled with weapons.
All right, great job. That's a good pick for a read. Um, so we have some comments. Of course, I think this is a good one. That Jimbo guy, a little patting on the back there. So and then let's see. Oh, yeah, Marisa says, yeah, if your training wheels are on a rocket, maybe. So sounds like people are enjoying it. Let's see.
I did have to clean that up a lot. I mean, yep, shot down by cargo. And the Tris can use his head even under duress. That's kind of.
Great reading. And let's see. Oh, John's here. Let's see. Which rules?
Nick, about him, I see you come on over here, and he remembered which rule to quote. He has an eidetic memory, and that becomes very useful later in the series. He doesn't realize that, of course, but later on, his eidetic memory becomes very useful. So, and that's why that's why he remembers what to quote. So.
Awesome. So, do you have an idea of who you would like to bestow your remaining prizes to?
Let's see. Let me scroll some of these. Nick has made some really good comments here. We can give a book to Nick. Nicole Plummer.
Oh, okay. There you go. All right, Nicole, you got a book. Let us know how you want it. Either
do you want an ebook or a print one, Nicole?
and then your third one. Who do you want that to go to?
Let's see. Scroll back here a bit. Maybe you might want this. Some good. I'd offer one to that Jimbo guy, but he's already got one. I
Yeah.
think he ended up to be one of the advanced readers. So,
Uh,
um,
Nicole's at say again. So Nicole, what version of the book do you want? Paperback or I mean hard
or an
copy
ebook.
or ebook? And John, has Jimbo won yet? No, he can't win. He already read it.
Yeah, Jimbo was one of the advanced readers. So, okay. But yeah, you'll get your ebook as soon as Chris says it's, up and live. So, um, John Osborne, then you have great taste in others. Let's see. Yeah, I'm seeing some good substantial comments here. This has put out some pretty good training wheels, Brooke. Training wheel on rocket.
Yeah.
That's a fun comment.
Oh,
How do you want yours, Marissa? Print or ebook?
all right, Marisa, how do you want yours? All right. So, oh, I thought that was her for a second. So while we wait on her to come back, and I can always ask her because she's in the next room. That's my wife. So,
Yeah.
and uh, ebook.
Sheila, were you an advanced reader for which book? Did Chris send you a copy of one of the other of them?
Yeah, but you can give her a signed copy though. That's different because she wanted the paperback, so you could always give her a signed copy of it. So yeah, you could probably stay with her.
For Sheila?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
And for
So
Marissa.
yeah,
So
and Marissa wants the ebook. So well so we come into the end of the show. I want to say first of all, congratulations. It sounds like it's going to be a great series.
it was
And
fun.
for now it's not out yet. It comes out tomorrow or midnight.
Tomorrow.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
so here's the book cover. Again, great book cover. Can't wait to see the upcoming book covers. I also of course like these book covers too. For
Yeah.
Shaman series, these are great too. But this is the one we're
Yeah, you
talking
can
about.
see on that when you showed the cover there of Running from the Gods, and we talked earlier about the fact that Ku has long hair, and so this is, when Chris showed me the first look at that, I'm going, is there any way we can give Ku his long hair?
Mhm.
And so we discussed that and realized, yeah, military haircut, military sci-fi. So I'm going, okay, which
It's
is
got
why I hesitated to bring up to him the idea of Tris and Kulao spying on the spaceport. So
yeah.
yeah,
I
the
would
cover's gorgeous, isn't it, Nicole?
yeah, I would love I love your idea of the crossing of characters. That would be pretty cool to see in a book. And not only that, tying them in like that's like, well, if I read all these books, I've got to read all these books because they tie into one another. So that'd be awesome.
We kind of decide, Jim and I've been kind of, like I say, brainstorming this, and kind of decided we could make it a bridge book
Mm-hmm.
from the last Shaman book leading into future Tris books. And so they're going to encounter each other during a time period that happens in the seventh book. And here's the teaser for you. The working title we have for it is "Skin in the Game."
Oh, very nice. Yes.
But I have told Jim that we're gonna have to wait until I finish the Shaman books to
Hmm.
work on that. We're brainstorming it, and probably by the time I get the Seventh Shaman book done, we may have kind of an outline and maybe some, we've been kind of tossing brainstorming notes back and forth and stuff like that. So
So
I'm gonna probably alternate chapters. We decided, that I'll write the coup chapters and he'll write the tryst chapters.
yeah.
So,
So you have
so
4 books out in the Shaman series, and
so far.
you're shooting for 7.
Hmm.
So do you have
That's what I'm under contract with for Chris is 7 in that
so
series.
do you have an idea of when 5 is going to come out, or it's a wait and see?
Well, it's wait and see. My goal is to have it into Chris by the end of October,
Hmm.
and like I said, the original goal was the end of July, and then Jim interrupted me, you know, with, bringing the Sergey books back up. So yeah, and then having to do the reworking on all 3 of them, so yeah, I just finally this week go back into book 5 of the Shaman books, which is challenged by the gods. So it has kind of the same running theme.
Yeah,
Uh,
no, that's awesome. So late October, and so maybe by the end of the year, the beginning of the year, the next year, it might come out.
yeah, I'm just based on how he did it with, let's see, running. I'm trying to remember. Well, let's see, book 4, the Shaman books. I think I turned that in last end of November last year,
Okay.
and it was in print in time for Superstars in early February.
Oh, okay.
So if
So
I can get this into him by the end of October, maybe January, February, depends on what Chris has got on his schedule,
yeah,
and I'll leave that up to him.
awesome, awesome.
He
But
knows what he's got in the shoot, and we've got plenty of other great authors with books coming out too. He'll just fit me in where he can.
all right, well, coming to you soonish, the next Shaman book, and so what about this series? When are you shooting for book 2 to come out, since you already have kind of 3 loaded?
Yeah, Chris gave me dates. I believe Echoes of Issel, which is the second one, is set for October 27th, if I remember right.
Oh wow.
And the third one, which was originally published as Dominion's Reach, I changed the title a little bit to Tentacles of the Dominion. I think it's a little more descriptive of what happens in the book.
Hmm.
And I think that one's set for December 1st. He told me originally they were going to be 5 weeks apart. And I've got the galleys for all 3 of them turned in. And I was I wasn't expecting the galleys for the third one for a while, since it's not coming out until beginning of December. But I'm glad he did, because it allowed me to. I mean, this has been a brain switch.
Hmm.
The Shaman books are all written in first person point of view, strictly from Ku's point of view.
Hmm.
The Sergei books are third person, multiple points of view. And one is military space fantasy, the other one is military political edge of thriller. And so complete brain switch. And I'm not one of these people that can really, go back and forth at the drop of a hat. So I was really glad that he sent me the galleys all at once, so I could get them all done and turned in. And so it was just this week that I got back to book 5 of the Shaman series.
Well, it sounds like you have a full plate moving forward, so congratulations
Yeah.
on that. And so, is there? Are you much on the conventions? Can people see you out in the wild coming up anytime soon?
Um, I think for the rest of this year, I'm pretty, pardon the pun, booked
Mm-hmm.
as far as writing them.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm looking at Superstars in February.
Mm-hmm.
And then the next weekend after that will be Life, the Universe, and Everything in Provo, Utah, which is kind of my home turf. This is where I was going to school, and met Dave and a number of other people that also write. And I don't know if you recognize some of their names, but that was so. Now that I'm finally getting some street cred back, I really need to show up there.
Mm.
So that, and then um, LibertyCon. I'm
Mm-hmm.
going to make it to LibertyCon this year,
Great convention.
and depending on how things are going with how fast I can crank out the rest of the shaman books, I'm hoping for Fantasy and definitely FactoryCon next year. I'm going to miss FactoryCon
We're
again
gonna
this
miss it
year,
this year
and
too.
I missed DragonCon,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm really hoping I can make. This is a lot, pardon the pun. Thank you. I grew up in a very punny family. I had two brothers that would do pun offs at the dinner table, and we'd be laughing so hard we could hardly eat. And either that or quoting Monty Python. So, yeah, I grew up in a house full of characters. So,
Yeah.
anyway, yes, I'm really, yeah, I feel bad. I'm missing Factory Con and that I missed Dragon Con. So we'll just see how things go. I do have these books to finish. And like I say, I'm actually going to Superstars a few days early so I can just
Mm-hmm.
hang out in the hotel room and write. I have a favorite Holiday Inn Express down the road that when I really, really need to get away from it all, my very, very supportive husband takes over being the cat daddy and lets me
Mm-hmm.
go camp at Holiday Inn Express for a week. And the nice thing about that is there's free breakfast. And I take a cooler full of food because there's a little refrigerator and a microwave in every room. And so I'll go downstairs for breakfast and I'll go outside for a walk, go up and down the stairs a few times. And the rest of the time, I mean, when I was cranking out the edits on Echoes of Issel, I did that. And I was spending, let's see, I'd sit down to really work about 8 in the morning and wrap up about 11 at night. So yeah, I was putting about 15 hours a day
Yeah,
to
that's a
get that
writing
done
schedule.
so I could get that turned
Wow.
around to Chris.
Yeah, no, that's
But I
awesome.
can't
So,
do that. I can't do that at home. There's just too many, little nitnoid things. I am the domestic engineer. So
uh-huh.
so there's little nitnoid stuff that continually pops up that I have to take care of when I'm at home. So
Awesome,
I'm
awesome.
grateful to a husband who will allow me to sneak off like that. He's very supportive. So,
No, that's awesome. Well, yeah, and sometimes you just got to shotgun it. You got to put that time in, you know.
oh yeah.
So for everyone, go to Diane's website, sign up for her newsletter so you can keep track of what she's up to, what she's doing, where she's going to be. Um, like and review on Amazon, and
You
most
know
of all,
what? That's that is actually my old Amazon page. I neglected to give you the current one because it's DT Read.
oh,
This one was the one that the old shaman books were on. No, excuse me, the old Sergey books were on,
okay.
and I had to take those down. Once as
Oh
soon
yeah,
as I
which
signed the contract with Chris,
yeah,
and so I pulled them all off of there, and I guess Chris will be putting them on my current one, which is now DT Read,
yeah.
and yeah, I should have. If I'd realized you still had that old one, I would have given you the new one.
Well,
I'll
so
post
what?
it somewhere.
Yeah, and what I'll do is I'll put the new one in the show notes. So I'll
Okay.
find that, put it in the show notes, along with the link to her novel, which comes out tomorrow. So when it comes out tomorrow, I'll get the link for that. I'll put it in the show notes here. So, people who watch this video can go directly there and buy the book. And if you don't go buy the book, you're a silly person. So go buy the book. And
Yeah, that's kind of why I wanted to do the launch tonight, is so that you could jump on it tomorrow,
yes,
tomorrow morning,
yes. Well,
because I
and
know so many of the launches are the night that the book has launched that morning, and it's like and then, people they've lost a few hours of opportunities.
yes, yes.
So yeah, go for it.
Yeah, go buy the book. It's gonna be great. Well, I'm happy for you. Congratulations.
Thank you.
I'm glad to see another one for you come out, and we looking forward to some more. And
It's just
but
really fun to see these resurfacing after all these years. I totally had not expected this, but like I said, beyond this original trilogy, it looks like we've opened the door to a lot, a more extensive series, and
awesome,
that I think will be a lot of fun.
very
So,
cool. Well, and
anyway,
before we go, let me do a few ads for things that are on the channel and otherwise. So, of course, future books. We've got the latest episode out now, and that is hosted by our friend Randall Willis, and Diane is on the latest episode of that. Other shows on the YouTube channel is the Feral Ladies of CKP. We've got a couple episodes out on that, and hopefully we might have one coming up soonish. And then we have Last Call with uh, the authors of CKP. Is basically we get together, have a few drinks, and mainly talk trash, but then we talk about books they've read or would like to not books they've read, books they've written, books they would like to write, or ideas. Sometimes new ideas come from it, but there's a lot of trash talk. And then on a personal note, you can find me on an upcoming episode of the Bane Free Radio Hour podcast. I just recorded an episode of that, so keep an eye out on that. But last but not least, go buy the book. It looks awesome. And, support your favorite authors. Sign up for Diane's newsletter and support her on her Patreon and all that good stuff. And Diane, thank you very much for coming on. Appreciate it.
The website is correct. That you put up, that is correct for the website. So.
Okay, awesome. And so, go support your favorite authors. Like, rate, review, do all the things. Even if you don't buy the book, which you're silly if you don't, go and support your authors by supporting them online, and it does more than you think. So do that. And Diane, welcome back to the show, and of course you're always welcome. So anytime you want to come back, just give me a holler and we'll have you back on.
Okay, thank you very much for having me. It was fun to be back.
Yes, well, it was a good show. You did great. Great choice of a reading, and until next time. But I'm excited for you. I'm excited to see the upcoming books that are coming out, and like I said, if you want to come back on and talk about those, you're more than welcome. And to our audience, thank you for those that are watching live and those who will watch in the future. Wouldn't have a show without you, so we appreciate it. And until next time, goodbye.
Thanks for watching.